No, I was saying I was listening intently to what you're saying, and I read the comment, the Kadir. I call it the Kadir comment, but that is not acceptable. And I will start where Ferdinand his comment about the 15th. This is the 15th Carry Festival. And I know that in some of the comments of officials and so on, and in fact, I believe on this show I raised um, a, 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 a report where the person said that this was our first Carry Festival since 1984, whatever that year was. But in fact, we had one in 2017. And I cannot understand how Barbados could find itself in such a situation of unpreparedness. Let me describe it as that. Because as you rightly said, the grand market is something that allows the visiting delegations to offer their products and services for sale, and that is a big part of it. That is what in the host country, the people in the host country, whether it be in Barbados, Trinidad, Haiti, or whatever, they look forward to going there and purchase. Now, this festival runs, I think, a maximum of 10 days. I think it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
This was the weekend, the beginning. This is where people are off work in larger numbers, and they plan to go and shop and all of these things. So there's no excuse for that. I saw complaints. I heard about costs increases because something being airlifted into air, brought in by air rather than by marine means and so on. So the question really is what has happened traditionally for these things. For example, I believe if I remember correctly, the 2017 decision was, and I mean, this is subject to correction. Unfortunately, I missed former Minister Stephen last year. You understand that he was, Tony, I don't know. You say I'm too diplomatic. I I don't know how else to be. But I let me put it this way. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. But the fact is there is lead time to plan. Barbados would have known that they were doing this for more than a year. If you go and check, because once you realize I was here, I went and I that I was home and you offered for me to come on the show. I started reading because while I was at the conference this afternoon, I was getting messages about what is happening or not happening and the dissatisfaction of people. So Barbados has done better than this. We have been able to organize events. There's usually a planning committee, and I hazard a guess, and I say this with no apology. I do not believe that the government has utilized the best talents that they are in organizing some of these things. Because unfortunately, we would have executed a Carifesta. I would have to go and investigate the program to see what, if anything, has changed. It is a pretty similar event, in terms of aspects of culture and so on. There are discussions and whatever the case may be. There seems to be, somebody mentioned the music and the I guess you call it fets or music shows or whatever. But these are things that have been done over and over again. If you go, I sent Dave a couple articles, and there's an article that I went and looked at, and this was an article in the 8th of May. It looks like 08/05/2017. Now I would have to look back at the calendar. It was a Saturday because people don't necessarily, sometimes we write like the American style. But this was an article in which the then Minister of Culture, Minister Lashley Torres, Carifesta 13 venues, and he basically was reporting Like they were ready pretty much, you know. You can see that we are quite ready, well in advance. This is the last sentence for hosting various events, which we'll be having here. We went to the gymnasium, that was one of the locations, Queen's Park, which had been recently renovated, etc. So the point I'm making is that there's a template
Mm-hmm.
that's available to any country. I've heard persons engage with Barbados having hosted, you know, certain events. They contact you, and the officers, the public officers, and so on, and other government officials engage them and share the information. So I cannot. I would want. Let me put it this way. I would want to hear from government what has gone wrong. The other thing that I find interesting, and at this point it is only hearsay, um, somebody mentioned in one of the WhatsApp messages that I got that they understand because that it will cost about $40 million. Now, looking back at 2017, there was a figure referred to there by Minister Lashley of $8 million. I do not know the agenda, but I also will ask the question because if you remember, Stephen Lashley, Mr. Lashley was asking about the absence of a budget that has been told to the public. We have not heard what the budgeted figures are. Normally, you would find that in estimates and so on. I would have to go back and look at them because you're planning for an event. Those should have been covered in the estimates that were debated earlier this year because you're planning for it.
Yes,
The
it was in the estimates. It was in
and
the estimates. I remember
so then
us talking about it. And just to clarify, Mr. Murray, I think he has that figure, but it was
okay.
we saw the line item in
So it would be interesting to see what that is, because the other question I would ask, because in reading and reflecting on what I understood to be the norm, there are also contributions that would come via CARICOM. I presume that they still are in a position to do that, and some of the other member states of CARICOM. So, you know, while we have an estimate, you know, allocation in the budget, it would also be useful to see, now that we have reached this stage, what government had allocated for it. But
an event. You don't know how to organize. You might not know how to manage.
could I say something here, Marcia, looking at this list? Because I don't know. I'm concerned that we, outside of these, because clearly you have, let's say you have Don Lisa Calendar Smith, special events coordinator, etc. These are not the people who will deal with facilities and spaces.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
let me explain what I'm saying. Let me explain.
uh-huh.
Having coordinated a year celebration of
Okay.
our 50th anniversary of independence, where you had dance, you had literary arts, you had film, you had all of these kinds of things. But there had to be a logistics team because you are using venues across the island, for example. So if Marcia Weeks is coordinating something to do with film or fashion, you do not necessarily have to be the person who decides that I have to make. You know what the specifications are that you want to ensure the best
Yeah.
facilities for your film event. But you are not, or should not necessarily be, the person who has to see that the physical facilities are set up, etc. So my question to the NCF is, who is responsible
Yeah. Mhm.
for the selection, the layout, setup, you know, preparation, and all of those things?
Yeah.
Because the ideal thing is that when you, Marcia, weeks ago, you would have advised what you need. But
Yeah,
when you go
but
to do
Miss McClean, see, that's the point I'm trying to make.
what
That
point?
the point I'm trying to make is this: that if you might be a great, I'm looking at this team, I'm in this area, and I know these people on here, and I'm saying that you might be great at dancing, but because you are not accustomed to producing events, you don't even know exactly what to ask for and at what times to ask for them,
So that
etc.
is no layering on top of it another issue, because even before you, in other words, I assume that you know what you asked for, but you're saying it may become further complicated because you asked for what you want. But I'm saying, even at the level before, well, to accommodate your asking and to know that you probably, who is coordinating all of these spaces, etc. Who is, so there's so much. I'm not saying you're very correct, but I'm saying that adds a further complication to it, which
Right.
suggests to me and the reason I use that is because I just visualized when we were planning those events that you had all these kind of people, but then you had persons from various, for example, MTW, the police, the BDF, and different agencies, which then had to say for this location, this has to be built out in this way. This is, and then you had a secretary ensuring that the finances were in place, orders were placed, and all of these things. Because at the end of the day, so your point is well taken, but I'm saying that there's a further issue where I wonder who is dealing with that kind of thing. Marcia, let me ask a question. I've been sitting here very quietly. And I just see the name highlighted there, dance coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned costumes. Now, I would assume that this person would have, let's say there are dance events at 3 or 4 destinations on four locations on X number of days. But there's somebody, once the dance, whoever choreographs the dances and decides on the costumes, they are produced somewhere and instructions are given.
Correct.
So the dance coordinator is to my mind, as I say, I don't know the arrangements here. I'm just trying to look at the layers and where multiple responsibilities have to fall, so that somebody says, this is how we're gonna, these are the designs. They're either going to be produced here, sourced here in part or in full, imported or whatever the case may be. And the way I see it, these persons at this level are not necessarily the persons who, beyond specifying what they want, will be dealing with the ordering of these things.
Correct.
And I have a suspicion that this is part of where things start to fall down, because we know that there's a certain style of how government does business. Who gets contracts to do what. And so I might have ordered as dance coordinator or music, whatever, certain things. But that information is passed on, and there is some individual or individuals responsible for doing that. We don't have their names, so we don't know. We can't even start to assess their competence or lack of competence. And I think that part of it, that's why I was trying to make the point that there's several layers in here. I am taking what you're saying as a given. But when I look at these titles and when I look at how this thing is playing out, now they of course also, because let me put it this way. To me, part of the fundamental problem is, and I use the grant market as an example, the government having decided, or whoever made that decision, that they would use the given location, would have to decide what designs are we going to use, what materials will be used, where we're going to get them from, who's going to get the work to do the construction and all of these things. And I have a suspicion that at that level, the kind of incompetence that we have seen in road construction and housing construction and all of these things continue to play out. So I'm simply saying that we need to step back beyond the concerns that you have here to ask, how are the problems further compounded by these people's strength, perhaps weaknesses and so on, to look at the further complications. Because with an event of this size and scale, you have to look at as we said, the construction and the logistics. And we seem in Barbados right now to rely very heavily on a few set of people in those kind of areas, and it seems to create a whole set of bottlenecks. Now that can be further compounded by the coordinating of these things, because I would have to know, for example, and I use special events. I would treat the Grand Market as a special event. I don't know. So I don't, All right, let me go to culinary arts where we know specifically what that is. We have a culinary arts coordinator. The question is, does the culinary arts coordinator here choose the locations, or is that person given locations and is consulted as to what's needed? So I'm saying there are a whole set of things in here that I believe they should be providing some other information. I don't know how much is shared beyond this, but I just suspect that because of the multiple layers of responsibility, that the ultimate coordination seems to have fallen totally askew.
Yeah, it's an hour before. That's just my experience. Go ahead.
I'm looking at this and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 categories of events, right? And I am going to go with the comment that Dave has here about the coordinator. And I would say the coordinator, now, there has to be coordinators or a coordinator of all of these coordinators.
Correct.
So that's a starting point. They should sit down and say, okay, the show begins on August 22nd. It was Friday was the 22nd. And that's the beginning. Costumes must be finished and in the hands of the performers by X date.
That's what I'm saying.
So I'm saying, now the question is, and this is where we may never hear, did they do this? And if they did this, were people told and then it didn't happen? Was there, so in other words, interim progress reports, because as I said, having coordinated things, a year festival which spanned some of these very things here. There were teams. There was an overall committee of enough people. Let me put it like that, to use a Bajan expression. But then they were broken down into subgroups dealing with very specific aspects of these. And then, so for example, so my point is that having experienced some activities under this, I was going to be specific, but then I thought not. But I have seen and I have been able to contrast where I have been involved in planning and others in this case. So I suspect that the kind of planning arrangement and descriptions that we've seen here probably were not in place, because you should never have an event of this nature and children sitting down waiting to get costumes. And it takes me back to the coordinator. May I say, look, for this dance, we need to have, there are 50 dancers, and there may be costume changes, whatever the case may be. But does this person have the say as to who produces these costumes? Or was this contract given to Mary Jane or John Jane, James, because of his or her contacts? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, so these are the kinds of things that will probably be unearthed, but I'm saying beyond this group here and the concerns that you express, and I understand those, there are some other fundamental issues which suggest to me that the people who were charged with the overall execution of this failed big time. That is the case. What I can tell you is that there were some projections and numbers. The government ended up with a $10 million bill for cruise ships that weren't really used. They then had cruises to a couple islands for a couple of days to try to recoup some of that money. But again, it is about planning, of course. So it is about the quality of planning and organization.
And the execution of it, yes.
But we're seeing here that it's about 1/7 of Barbados is considered the Scotland district is unique. What are some of the dangers that, because you said you learned that from going to school
as a school girl? Yeah, the topography, the soils of the Scotland district are different. If you look at this part of the island, we are limestone, I would say, for the most part, and Victor could correct me if I'm wrong, but on the Scotland district you have in many places clay soils,
right?
And it makes it fragile. As I told you, my geography teacher, the late Flora Jordan, she used to say that given, and this is my summary, negative conditions, you might end up separating Barbados into two parts because of
Mm.
the fragility of the Scotland district and the soils and so on. And therefore, your what I would say is your construction footprint. That's the word I would use. The technical people can
Mhm.
tell me
Mhm.
how to say it better. You have to be extremely careful as to how you go about, what you construct and where you construct and, what kind of methods and so on. And it was therefore felt that one of the best ways to protect that part of the island is to leave it in its natural state. Or where you're constructing, you had to do so with a level of care and caution and a recognition of the conditions. Um, so you would find that, and I went during the course of the evening. I'll see if I can find the information
Mhm.
in terms of the position taken, and part of the position taken by late Prime Minister Thompson was that we would leave that it was an important part of a natural patrimony that we should not do anything to harm it or to create significant problems, and it
Mhm.
should be there for us and our guests, tourists, our guests being tourists and so on, to enjoy. My worry, and I mean, this is I ask questions.
Mhm.
Barbados, if you come on this side of the world, people will remember the issue we had with Archcott, and there were some concerns as to what might have triggered, if such a thing happened, what might have triggered the problem, the collapse
Mhm.
and so on. And so you had to be very careful in construction. My question is, we seem to have moved away from the position taken by late Prime Minister Thompson to one in which we've seen a lot of excavation and so on. And in the process of construction, remember the other thing too that we have to concern ourselves with, the kind of weight that is put on our roads and so on. So to me, there's some questions I would like the geologists and the engineers, the structural engineers and other environmental engineers and whoever else to tell us what are the possible consequences of, and I would use the word interfering
Mhm.
with what has been there in terms of excavation and construction and the movement of building materials and heavy trucks on these places. That to me is, what are the dangers of these things? And
Yeah.
are we seeing any of the consequences or any of those dangers materializing?
We should be able to appeal to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marcia, I
Yeah.
don't think that well, when you say appeal to them, I was reading as in relation to the question.
Yes.
It's a very different kind of body. It's a membership body, but it doesn't, um,
Adjudicate.
no, basically it says a network of, because they have a set of commissions, and one of them is a commission on ecosystem management, a network of professionals whose mission is to act as a source of advice on the environmental, economic, social, and cultural factors that affect natural resources and biological diversity. The International Union, so it's actually a UCN, but that doesn't have the same kind of authority or structure. We have over 30 groups divided into thematic groups, specialist groups, and task forces. Each network is focused on building and strengthening communities to achieve specific goals in different nations worldwide. So, really and truly, it can advise and classify and so on, but I don't think it has the kind of power. It's a very different kind of structure. Let me put it that way. We
Mhm.
can appeal to them to help us to as a country to understand what we're doing, but it doesn't carry the force of the same kind of force of it. Well, I'm not can't say the force of law. Well, it's a different kind of body. non-governmental organizations and so on come together to address these issues. So the answer to the question would be, if you seek to appeal, it's not the same kind of appeal and the same kind of process of a hearing and advising government and so on in the way that we would have had in relation
to the
to that
cybercrime
legislation, that cybercrime bill.
Yeah.
Scotland District, but we are now giving other individuals.
The question, in fact, the response to that, Victor, to this thing about tourism pay our bills, where do we take our tourists who pay the bills to see the same things that they want to destroy? You know?
Correct.
So you're going to tell us
that, or that they are destroying?
That they're destroying. That's correct. So you're telling me that tourism is important, but as I say, that's where we take our tourists to enjoy the
natural beauty of the country.
Precisely.